I want to talk today a little bit about mid hump pedals, and three of my favorites, and some ways to stack them. What I have set up here today is I'm in the Line 6 Helix, I'm in HX Edit, and I'm using the Brit Plexi normal amp and cab model from Line 6, just the factory settings. And if you ever plugged into this, you know it's kind of a very bassy, woolly sounding amp. The reason I did that is because if you try these settings that I'm going to show you today and these pedals, it really highlights the differences very well. The reason I'm talking about this is a lot of times guys struggle with bass and good bass response and getting the most out of their um, their bass response. A lot of times, oh, the bass gets flubby, the bass gets flubby. Mesa boogies are notorious for it, and these old Marshalls are like that too. So there's a couple different pedals, and the one you hear most often associated with this is a tube screamer. So let's take a look at a tube screamer first, because that's the most common one. The way I've got this tube screamer set up is pretty standard for this kind of application. I got the gain at 1.5, the tones in the middle, 4.9, and the levels at 8.1. And when we take a look at this pedal on the spectrum analyzer, come over to the spectrum analyzer screen, you'll see that this is what you get. Now, the blue line is my test tone, so that's unity. So anything above it is above unity, and anything below it is being cut. So you can see we're cutting all the way up to we get to about 90 hertz. And then we got a nice hump in the middle, about 650, 600, 500, probably about 500 hertz is our peak. We're probably plus 8 dB. And then we get out to 3K, we're at unity, and then it's cutting anything above 3K. And what this will do is it'll help tighten up the bass. It's always how it's usually described. It basically cuts off some of the bass going to that amp so the amp can reproduce those bass frequencies more cleanly than it otherwise has been. And it won't break up as bad and won't get quite as kind of flubby sounding as the way it's usually described. Um, just taking this pedal like this and putting it in front of this amp makes a huge difference. You should definitely try it and see how it works, because it does such a fantastic job for this situation. The next pedal I want to take a look at is another one that's commonly used for this, and it's this one here. Now this is the Minotaur, or a clon. And what a clon does is kind of the same thing the way I have it set. I have the gain at 2.4, I have the level at 5.4, and the tone at 5.6. And if we come over here and look at the spectrum analyzer on the clon, or the Minotaur, how I have it set up, it's actually cutting a little bit. It's a little bit below unity. Unity would be 3 dB higher. But we're cutting bass till we get out to about 150 hertz. Then we got a bump. The bump's a little higher than on the tube screamer. This bumps at about 1K, and it bumps about 6 dB. And then when we get out to about 3K, we're at unity, and then everything above unity is getting cut. It's a pretty steep cut up here. Just using this pedal like this into that Brit Plexi model makes a huge difference also. Maybe not quite as much as the Tube Screamer, it's not quite as aggressive as the Tube Screamer, but it really helps with the bass, and it really helps smooth the bottom end out. It helps the guitar sit better in that amp. It helps that amp just deal with the guitar tones a lot better. Another pedal that I like to use for this is a valve driver. I've owned these for a while. I have a couple of the originals. And the way I have this set, again, is similar. The gain is low. Gain's on 2.2. The bass is on 2.7. And the level is up on 8.7. And the treble is off. And if we take a look at a spectrum analysis of this pedal, you see another nice big hump, again around 1K. We're at plus 9 dB. We're cutting anything up below 150 is being cut. You also see the pedals breaking up down in here because it has a hard time, similar to the amp, reproducing bass below 150, but we're cutting here instead of boosting, so it makes a big difference. And it doesn't react badly with the amp because it's cutting frequencies, not boosting frequencies. It also has a much broader shouldered boost, and it goes all the way out to 7K. So we don't get to unity until we're all the way out at 7K. This, if you plug this pedal with these settings into that amp, it makes it a little brighter, a little more aggressive in the top end. It definitely cuts that bass. It tightens the bass up some. Now my favorite way to run this is like this, which is the valve driver. Is the clon into the valve driver, with the way I have those two set up. And if we do that, what we end up with is this. Now, if you'll recall, let me turn off the valve driver. We end up with this. Now, very smooth cutting all the way up to maybe 160 hertz. Big hump at around, what is that, 800 hertz, plus 12 dB, plus 13 dB. And then boosting all the way until we get out to 4500, and then aggressively cutting because the line's pretty steep, so it's cutting pretty aggressively. It's a big mid hump, largely centered around 800 or 1K. It provides a big boost. If we turn the valve driver back on, if you see, remember how it was breaking up in here? But because the clon, which is this one, was cutting, it settles that valve driver down just enough to smooth it out. And you end up with this, which is a really nice smooth line, which means the pedal's not really distorting. It's pushing the amp to distort. Pedals, it's breaking up a little bit. You can see it up in here, but it's not that aggressive. Now, if I do the other one, which is another great way to run this, and I turn off the clon and I turn on the valve driver, what we get is this. Again, the turn off the clon and turn on the tube screamer. Again, the tube screamer now is aggressively cutting, so it smooths out that bass on that valve driver. It's a little bit more of an aggressive pedal, and it's pushing this up here more. You can see it breaking up a little bit more, but it has a little more hair and a little more sizzle up in here. It's another great sound. It's a little more aggressive sound. So this is the clon versus the valve driver. You see the valve driver also has the tube screamer. And you see the tube screamer also has a little bit more low mids. The clon's a little bit pushed to more higher frequencies. And again, different sounds. Your mileage may vary. I prefer the clon into the valve driver, but the tube screamer into the valve driver is a great combo also. Give it a try.